All right, Scorp, very clearly here, you're going to have to keep your cool. You don't want to do anything that you're going to regret later on. But it could also be very frustrating that you're seeing the same thing over again. And the other thing that I would say here is you need to be careful about losing your temper with yourself. But I think that this is going to be more specifically having to do with a person in particular, or a group of people for that matter. But keep your temper. Don't allow anger to rule you, and the never-ending story. So clearly here you're needing to keep your cool, keep calm, regardless of, whatever irritating situation that you're dealing with that could be repetitive, looking at never-ending story. But what I found interesting is something that I think is very important, especially when we're talking about Scorpio. It says, remind yourself, you will go far further when you harness your power and use it at the right time, which is, by the way, not right now. So don't let out the stinger right now. Now, as far as the never-ending story, when we're talking about unnecessary drama, your mantra is going to be very different than Virgo's. Virgo's was, fuck it, it is what it is. Yours, I like a little bit more. It says, this is a time to avoid drama at all costs, especially when it comes to other people's quote-unquote stuff. Your sensitivity is on overload these days, and you're best served by keeping your distance. Your mantra is, not my circus, not my monkeys. All this trauma will pass, and you will carry on unscathed and blameless. Not my circus, not my monkeys. It's not your problem, but yet it's continuously being made your problem. And that may be where the anger is coming through here. All right, Scorp. Here is your overall. 3 of Cups. Oh boy. Yeah, so possibly other people. Now, on the other hand, with the 3 of Cups being the overall, right? It is celebration. It is about the support group, the people who give a shit about you and what you're doing. Celebrating something good, joyous. Maybe a little bit of drinky drink, but we'll see here, because more times than not, the 3 of Cups is going to show that there are other influences, or what I like to refer to as the cackling hen syndrome. Now, in the past, the 7 of Pentacles. So, in the past, you may be looking at a situation and looking at how there is still potential for growth. I always question with the 7 of Pentacles on whether or not somebody is actually happy with what they're seeing, what the results are. I think the best description that I've ever seen was with the Steampunk Tarot. It says, how is reality stacking up to your expectations? But this is about reevaluating whether or not a situation can continue to grow, especially if you're not happy with the results that you currently have. Okay, in the present moment, the 6 of Swords, no, you need to move on. You need to move on from, whatever difficult situation there was. So for you, it's like literally leaving it behind. You may not see how there is any potential for growth. And that could have to do with, another person here, or a third-party situation, which is possible. Future conditions, the 7 of Wands. I look at this and I think that for you, it's a little bit defensive, but it's not like, the 5 of Swords. I would expect there to be a little bit more hostility, but I don't think that that's it. When you're looking at the 7 of Wands, you're talking about, standing up for yourself, defending your position, defending your choice. And this is like the strength to fight off the opposition here, the heart and the strength. But I also see this as kind of like drawing the line in the sand, like, this is what I won't deal with anymore. But you're needing to, defend what you have chosen to do here with the 6 of Swords. And you may have other people around you that aren't, supportive, but we'll see here. We'll see. Your best path to follow, the Ace of Swords. Make sure that, you're seeing things clearly, right? You're not allowing other influences to kind of cloud your judgment and your choices, but this is also about accepting the truth, but I feel like that's something that you already have done. Accepting the truth that maybe a situation is not going to grow in the way that you want it to, and it's time to move on. Now, for some of you, this could literally be about, I want to move on from this and I don't ever want to have to deal with this again, right? But what is the truth of the situation? Is it something that is going to be constantly persistent? You know, having to deal with other influences, you know, people who are possibly preventing potential growth, whether we're talking about work or a relationship here. You know, but definitely needing to see the truth and be clear. You know, I also feel like for you, it's like needing to have the truth completely out there. In your environment, the High Priestess, oh boy. With the High Priestess in your environment, you're talking about hidden information, but it's also, you know, very typical of Scorpio not to act without watching something first. But I also feel like there are things that you know that you may be keeping to yourself. And I look at that Ace of Swords, and again, I feel like the truth needs to be spoken. Everything needs to be made clear to other people, to, you know, a person that you're dealing with in particular who is, you know, constantly involved in other situations, looking at the Three of Cups. But I look at it this way, and I think, you know, for a lot of you, you realize that there is no potential for growth. And I say that because of the Six of Swords. Now, it may be that you're keeping this to yourself, but eventually, you know, the truth does come out here. And I do feel like you're left to kind of defend what you chose to do. But I worry that some of you may be doing this because of another person or other people. Your hopes and your fears, the Ace of Wands. So, you know, the action in moving away from something that you don't see potential growth in is because there is another opportunity, or at least you're hoping for, you know, there to be something better. But like, I still feel like a lot of you are going to have to defend the fact that you're wanting a new passionate beginning and you're making the choice to leave something behind in order to get that. But you may have been like keeping this to yourself for a while, and it's kind of like coming out, you know. And with the Seven of Wands, you know, there is that defensive nature, but is there a potential for it to become hostile because of the Oracle cards? But I look at that Ace of Wands, and that is what you are not only hoping for, but I think it's what you're expecting though too. You know, the fear there is that the current situation is going to prevent you from having, you know, that new beginning here, that new passion, that new drive, something that, you know, I think is more exciting for you. But there is definitely something that you're going to have to leave behind. But like, I feel like you're doing that and not really saying anything about it. But eventually, like I said, it comes out. Yeah. And talking about hostile, the Queen of Swords coming out, and I do feel like that is you, especially if you're left to have to defend yourself. But again, I look at that Three of Cups, and this is specifically going to have to do with, you know, other people being involved. But the Queen of Swords coming out is definitely you kind of like, you know, drawing the line in the sand, like big time, and like turning your back and going, you know what? I'm doing what I need to do. It is what it is. You know, you're becoming cold. You're becoming a little bit angry, I would say, for sure. But it's not without reason. It's not without reason. You know, but rather than holding all that in and bottling it up, I think it would be better to communicate it in a truthful and honest way, rather than, you know, being very hostile and very defensive over the fact that you can't deal with that anymore. And then the Tower, damn, man. You know, this is not about what is happening to you, but basically what you're kind of creating, because it just can't withstand anymore. And for you, it is an abrupt, like, boom, and everything is coming down and you're done. I mean, you know, for you, it's like, yes, I created this, but this is why. And, you know, it's almost like I'm not blaming myself anymore. The Hierophant. The Hierophant, and looking at the Seven of Pentacles, I look at that and I think that for a lot of you, you felt like that was the right thing to do. And it's also talking about, you know, a personal commitment that you've made here. You know, I look at that and I think if we're talking about traditional values, it's almost like saying that, you know, I stuck with this and I stuck with it because, you know, it's considered the right thing to do, but I'm not seeing the growth that I want. And it may be because of another person. And with the Lovers, you know, it's the choice here that you're making, a big choice here to move away from this because you're not seeing that growth, but you're kind of like keeping that to yourself, but you know that it's still very much an issue. This could also be about what was like being kept from you, but clearly you find out, and you know anyway. With the High Priestess, you know. But with the Lovers, you know, for a lot of you, this is going to have to do with a significant relationship and making that major choice to move on. And you are left to, you know, say that this is bullshit, I'm not doing it anymore. Boom, all of a sudden, drastic, shocking change. But you are being cold and harsh about it. But not without reason. That's what I'm getting from this. It's not without reason. And what you need is to be in a more supportive, you know, situation here, especially with the Three of Cups being the overall. But like I said, I feel like that's because of outside influences. But you're willing to drastically change everything in your life if it means that you get to have a better beginning than what you are currently dealing with. You know, and for you, it's, I need to leave this behind once and for all. And this is what I'm doing, and that's it. End of story. And yeah, I'm telling you, speak your truth. Purpose. What was the purpose of all of this? What is your purpose? In order for you to find that purpose, you need to break free. And with the Six of Swords, yeah, that's what you're doing. But you also need to speak up. There is definitely something that needs to be said in a very truthful way. You know, sometimes the truth hurts, but, you know, somebody definitely needs to hear it. You know, and you're going to have to really keep your calm. But I look at the Tower and I think with the Queen of Swords, you know, I think that for you, it has hit the breaking point that it's not going to be that easy for you to keep your cool. Wow. You know, but again, it's not without reason, though. You know, you did what you felt like was the right thing to do and sticking with a situation that, you know, wasn't growing. I mean, at one point, I'm sure that there was that potential, but damn, man. Wow. All right. And wise leader, you are a beacon for others. I look at that and I think that for a lot of you, you know, this is you kind of like, I feel like you're doing what's necessary for people that are around you. Because if you're talking about you being a beacon for others, for some of you, you're doing this because there are other people involved that, you know, need you to kind of like step up to the plate here and do what's necessary. But uncovering treasure is showing that, you know, beneath all of this, there is something better. And I go right back to that Ace of Wands. You know, but you are definitely doing what you feel like is necessary for you. You know, but in being a wise leader here, you're also going to show others that there is a way forward out of situations that, you know, are not growing. Because I look at that and I look at the Hierophant and I look at what society, you know, would expect people to do. You know, if it's not working, you stay with it. Well, why? Well, because it's the right thing to do. But why? Why is that considered the right thing to do if I'm not seeing what I want, you know? But wow, Scorp. Holy crap. And, I would just say here that, again, right, not your circus, not your monkeys. Whatever drama is being brought to the table to you, it does not have to be your problem. You don't have to, get involved in something that is going to push you to that breaking point. But I think that this is something different. And there is definitely a need for you to kind of break free, if I could talk right, even if it means completely wiping everything out in the process.